Welcome to Module 3 of the OCAT Virtual Training Series, Leveraging Conflict to Strengthen Partnerships with Customers. The Virtual Training Series is designed for staff wanting to refresh their knowledge and skills, staff who are responsible for training or coaching others, and new OCAT staff. The training modules within this series are designed for individuals, but can be used in a group setting by supervisors and trainers to strengthen caseworker skills. Throughout the modules, you will be directed to resources and practice exercises intended to enhance the learning experience. In this module, you will define conflict and share common areas of conflict, explore how customer circumstances may affect conflict, recognize different ways to handle conflict, and identify effective conflict resolution strategies. The training is grounded in these guiding principles. Each customer is the subject matter expert of their life and has the capacity to grow and change when they are ready and able. Through positive interactions between the caseworker and customer, both have the opportunity to gain a clear understanding of the customer's circumstances. OCAT is designed to support the caseworker's expertise and experience working with customers. OCAT captures strengths and opportunities that assist caseworkers and customers in working together to develop a relevant and meaningful plan. Another important guiding principle in your work with customers is to strive to be the calm within their storm by working in partnership with them and treating them with dignity and respect. Remember that our customers are experiencing incredibly stressful circumstances. Consider for a moment if you were one of the customers you serve. How stressful and complicated would you imagine your life to be? Now imagine that you have multiple systems or programs adding to your stress with tasks and requirements you may not feel you have the time, energy, or resources to accomplish, yet your ability to pay rent or buy food depend on getting the tasks completed. When we pause for a moment to reflect on our customers' circumstances, we are more likely to move into a place of compassion and be more patient. Change in and of itself is stressful, and when added with the level of uncertainty that exists for those living in poverty, the chronic stress understandably takes a toll on physical and mental health, adding to the challenges our customers may face. When combined with the stress of living in poverty and the likelihood that many of our customers also have a history of adverse childhood experiences and/or trauma, we have further compounded the challenges that may get in the way of customers achieving their goals. Let's talk a little more about adverse childhood experiences and how those may negatively affect the adult customer you are working with today. Let's first discuss the definition of conflict, its effects when it is not managed well, and common topics that may lead to conflict. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, conflict is defined as competitive or opposing action of incompatibles. For example, divergent ideas, interests, etc. Interestingly, synonyms for conflict include tug-of-war, battle, and war. Given these synonyms, it is no wonder that most of us dread conflict and associate it with someone winning and someone losing. However, if we revisit the Merriam-Webster definition, notice that it doesn't say anything about whether someone must win or lose, be right or wrong. Conflict is merely the existence of opposing viewpoints. Unfortunately, when conflict is unresolved, meaning avoided or handled poorly, it creates barriers to collaboration and cooperation. When conflict is mismanaged, it can be very harmful to relationships, leading to withdrawal, resentment, and mistrust. If the customer views their relationship with you or your colleagues in this way, it will carry over into their interactions with others within your agency. If we are preoccupied with conflict or engaged in a cycle of unresolved conflict, it negatively impacts our ability to focus, efficiently resolve issues, and decreases our overall productivity. Conflict is stressful, and unresolved conflict can become toxic, negatively impacting your mental, emotional, and physical health, and the other person's health. Before we begin, take a moment to think about the topics or situations in your life that may elicit conflict. Now take a moment to think about the topics or situations in the lives of your customers that may elicit conflict. Where are there similarities and differences? Although the topics and situations you just considered are all very real examples that may create conflict, technically anything has the potential to create conflict. What fuels or escalates conflict is actually a combination of poor communication. This can more easily occur when there are opposing opinions, power struggles, performance issues, differing priorities or values. An example may be that the program requires something that conflicts with the customer's priority of securing affordable quality childcare first. And bad days. We all understand how a bad day and stress has the potential to make every typically small thing a much bigger issue, resulting in conflict. We know that technically conflict can arise from any topic or situation, and that poor communication often fuels or escalates conflict. Additionally, when we feel our values, ideas, or efforts are being judged or threatened, we may respond in defensive ways. Now we are going to explore sensitive topics within OCAT, where customers may respond defensively, and tips for navigating those difficult conversations. Take a moment to think about your interactions with customers. What topic areas or specific questions in the OCAT tool tend to elicit discomfort or conflict? In our quest to better understand customer circumstances so that we can better assist them in removing potential barriers to long-term employment, we are faced with asking sensitive questions that may elicit a defensive response and leave the customer questioning why it's any of your business. We will walk through a few examples of areas in the OCAT tool that may be more challenging to discuss with customers. Understandably, a customer may question why you care about their relationships. This is a great opportunity to explain to them that all of us experience relationship challenges from time to time, and that sometimes those challenges can make it very difficult to concentrate at work, may negatively affect our performance, or interfere with our ability to show up to work when scheduled. By understanding whether the customer is experiencing some of these relationship challenges, you can offer additional resources and support to help them be more successful in meeting their goals. As we discussed in Module 2 of this training series, the DSM-5 defines substance use disorders based on their level of severity: mild, moderate, or severe, which is determined by the number of diagnostic criteria met by an individual. To be considered a substance use disorder, the substance use must be recurring or chronic in nature. Additionally, the substance use must cause impairment, such as health problems, disability, and/or an inability to participate in daily activities. Customers may not realize their substance use has escalated to the extent of needing additional support, and may not see the connection to their ability to meet their goals. Sometimes it can be helpful to explain to customers that we ask these questions to better understand anything that may make it more challenging for them to meet their personal and professional goals. When we remind them that our goal is to support them toward achieving their goals, they may be more willing to honestly share their experiences. Similar to substance use, customers may not realize their mental health is interfering with meeting their goals. To proactively address the customer's potential discomfort with sensitive questions, you could begin with the following disclaimer. I'm about to ask you several questions that may seem very personal. The reason I'm asking these questions is to determine which resources and services we can provide that will help you achieve your goals. Although we know that there are some topics that may elicit conflict while conducting an OCAT appraisal, it is how we deal with the conflict that can either improve or worsen the situation. Now we'll look at how many of us typically handle conflict poorly. When we find ourselves in conflict, we tend to take an immediate either-or mindset, meaning that we operate from a belief that we must make our point, get our way, be right, or protect our pride. Then, once we're aggravated because the other person doesn't agree with our viewpoint, we tend to let our emotions drive the discussion rather than taking a step back to be objective and logical. We also tend to make the grave mistake of assuming that whatever story our mind has created about the conflict is the only true and accurate story. When this occurs, we are likely to deploy unhelpful tactics like blaming the other person, accusing them of malicious intent, and negatively interpreting most of what they do or say. Meanwhile, our brain kicks in and responds to stress the only way it knows how, by sending adrenaline surging through our body, pushing us to fight back, avoid the other person, or shut down. There are several unhelpful responses that many of us may do occasionally because we don't know how to do it differently, or it's just a bad habit we need to break. When we feel overwhelmed by conflict or defensive, we may withdraw or refuse to discuss the other's needs. In our defensiveness, we may exhibit anger and lash out with resentful remarks, sarcasm, or hurtful comments. If we feel threatened by the conflict, we may blame others, make threats to get our way, or reject others. Many of us have had such negative, unproductive experiences with conflict that we may succumb to our fear of conflict and expect negative outcomes, thereby avoiding conflict at all costs, despite its debilitating toll on our health, well-being, and happiness. In Module 2, we covered the variety of reasons why living in poverty is stressful. Now let's see how that contributes to conflict you may experience with customers. In Module 2 of this virtual training series, we talked about the effect of stress, ACEs, and trauma on executive functions, like emotional regulation. To recap, stress is the brain's automatic physiological response to any demand, and a key characteristic of living in poverty that makes it so stressful is the constant state of change and unpredictability the customer experiences. Typically, people respond to stress by fighting back, running away and avoiding, or freezing and withdrawing, all of which can elicit or worsen conflict. Toxic stress as a result of adverse childhood experiences, known as ACEs, can impair healthy brain development and functioning. These are the skills that help us effectively manage our time, problem solve, initiate tasks, and regulate our emotions. As you can see, challenges with executive functions not only get in the way of customer success, which can elicit conflict, but once the conflict is initiated, the customer may lack the skills to effectively self-regulate and problem solve. Sadly, the effects of trauma can further contribute to conflict. Symptoms may include unpredictable emotions like anger, guilt, self-blame, hopelessness, numbness, and fear. Health challenges such as insomnia, difficulty concentrating, anxiety, depression, body aches, pains, irritability, and a host of other chronic illnesses, and trouble with relationships as a result of the challenges associated with managing the recurring and troublesome thoughts and feelings, which can lead to someone isolating themselves lashing out at others, and acting defensively. Fortunately, research has demonstrated that our brain is adaptive and executive functions can be strengthened. Here are some examples of executive functioning skills for each category. When there are challenges with organization skills that may manifest as poor performance when you try to address the issues with the customers, that could elicit conflict. When we look at the regulation skills, we can see where challenges with these skills may result in the customer being unaware of their poor performance and resistant to discussing the issues in a constructive manner. At the end of this module, there is a recommended exercise on the connection between behaviors you may observe in customers and specific executive functions that may be affected. When completing the exercise, consider how you can work with customers to strengthen their executive function skills while also modeling healthy conflict resolution. Now that we've discussed how we might handle conflict poorly and the role of adopting a positive mindset, let's dive into specific tools for navigating conflict effectively. Unfortunately, our beliefs about conflict can also help or hinder the situation. Take a moment to think about beliefs people sometimes hold about conflict. How do these beliefs help or hurt resolving conflict? Although it is understandable that we may have ingrained negative beliefs and experiences related to conflict, if we can adopt a more positive mindset, despite the discomfort that conflict can create, we will find ourselves better able to effectively resolve conflict. A general rule of thumb is that if it is important enough for someone to get upset and conflict ensues, then it is important enough to explore and resolve. As we mentioned in Module 1 of this virtual training series, it is important to practice active listening and seek to understand the other's perspective, values, and motivations. In doing so, you will gain a better understanding of their deeper needs and how you can work together to address issues. It's important to remember that when done well, conflict can be an opportunity to build rapport, deepen relationships, meet each other's most important needs, practice healthy communication skills, and model effective conflict resolution for others. In addition to reframing your mindset about conflict when we learn to practice healthy and effective communication as part of a daily habit, we minimize conflict. As we mentioned before, conflict often arises when there are different viewpoints. Sometimes we may not actually have very different viewpoints, but we have the perception that our viewpoints are different due to miscommunication. If we can practice effective communication skills, we can resolve conflict more easily. Let's do a quick refresher from Module 1. Key qualities of great listeners include actively listening with the goal of truly trying to understand the other person's perspective and avoiding allowing their thoughts to wander. Regularly checking in with the speaker and paraphrasing what they said or asking for clarification. Paraphrasing is also a great tool to help the customer feel that you are genuinely interested in what they have to say. Typically, when people feel heard and valued, it goes a long way toward conflict resolution. Doing your best to imagine what it might be like to experience the customer's life circumstances. Expressing empathy should not be confused with agreeing, identifying with, or sharing common past experiences with the customer. Finally, great listeners also refrain from assumptions, which includes avoiding behaviors such as interrupting to finish a sentence or tuning out because you assume you know what they are about to say. Stephen Covey explains too often we seek to be understood rather than seeking to understand others. Conflict can often arise when our message lands poorly for the receiver. Effective speakers reduce conflict by doing the following. They share expectations, program requirements, decisions, and next steps, while also expressing and conveying interest in the customer's success and explaining how meeting expectations will lead to customer success. Effective speakers focus on the problem and not the person. While it can feel very personal to be on the receiving end of someone else's frustration, disappointment, and anger, the more you can depersonalize it, the better you can work in partnership with the customer to get to the root of the problem and problem solve together. Effective speakers stick to observations and facts without adding their interpretation of those events. We all make mistakes. However, sometimes we admit them, and at other times we may try to blame others. The latter creates and escalates conflict. Effective speakers admit their mistakes, which goes a long way in repairing the relationship and building trust. Great speakers know how to ask great questions that are designed to foster self-reflection and dig deeper to the root of the issue. To minimize conflict, avoid asking questions that imply you are judging the customer's opinions or decisions. For example, it is not helpful to ask someone, "What were you thinking? Why would you do that?" Or "Didn't you know that?" In general, the more you can avoid asking questions that begin with the word why, the better. Finally, remember the importance and positive effect of being respectful. To reduce opportunities for misunderstandings, it is helpful to practice communication that is clear, concise, accurate, and timely. For example, if you are discussing someone's performance, avoid beating around the bush, long run-on sentences, or waiting until weeks or months after the issue began. Regarding accuracy, it is imperative that you only share facts, things that are verifiable, and if multiple people observed, they would come to a similar conclusion. It is not helpful to assume your perception or interpretation of what you observed is accurate, and then push that onto someone else. For example, telling someone you obviously don't care because you missed your appointment will likely lead to conflict rather than simply asking, "What prevented you from keeping your appointment?" Here are some examples of thought-provoking questions that can help you dig deeper and open dialogue in a non-threatening way. What bothers you most about this? What about this is most important to you? What am I missing? What do you think would be helpful? What do you need to feel comfortable moving on? It is helpful to preempt questions with why you're asking. For example, you could say, "I'd like to work together to figure this out. Can you help me understand what bothers you most about this?" What if we've practiced effective communication skills and have done our best to regulate our response to the situation, but conflict still ensues? First, remember that conflict is inevitable, and when navigated well, it can serve as a great opportunity to deepen relationships and meet each other's most important needs. If you find yourself in the middle of a conflict, there are a few ways to help de-escalate the situation. Stay calm. Escalation leads to conflict. When we're angry, we stop listening to understand, and instead we only pay attention to the purpose of forming our own opinion and arguing. Be objective and remain non-judgmental, which requires self-monitoring your own thoughts and responses to be aware of when you may be judging or reacting to what the customer shares. Instead, listen, paraphrase, and empathize with customer circumstances. Remember that we are each the experts of our own life, and we tend to only share with others what we want to share, and only to the extent we think others need to know. Furthermore, we make decisions for our lives based on our available resources and what we think is best. The more we can proceed with curiosity, laying aside our own beliefs, judgments, or perspectives, the more we create a safe space for others to share their needs, wants, and expectations without fear of repercussion or conflict. Agree when you can. Don't argue for the sake of arguing and truly pick your battles. Accentuate the positive and agree where you can to help establish common ground. In the moment, ask yourself, is it more important to be right or to have a good relationship that leads to positive outcomes for your program and the customer? And set limits. If nothing is working or it turns abusive, set limits by walking away, getting a superior, and/or rescheduling the appointment. You can do this by calmly stating something like, I can tell this is very important to you, and I'd like to better understand how I might be able to help. For now, I think it makes sense to schedule a time to discuss this later, when we can both think clearly and work together. Finally, be willing to ask yourself the tough question, how might I be contributing to this conflict? Now we'll discuss key takeaways from the module, additional recommended exercises to strengthen what you learned today, and recommended resources available through the OCAT Learning Center. In this module, we defined conflict and discussed potential areas within OCAT that may elicit discomfort or conflict. We also discussed how customer circumstances may affect conflict. Hopefully, as a result of this webinar, you can recognize different ways, helpful and unhelpful, to handle conflict and utilize effective conflict resolution strategies. Remember to counter negative personal beliefs about conflict by adopting a positive mindset about conflict and using it to understand the other's perspective and strengthen relationships. Stress, ACEs, and trauma can make conflict more likely and more difficult to resolve effectively. Your ability to be a great listener and an effective speaker will go a long way in preventing, de-escalating, and resolving conflict. After completing this module, print the handouts provided and complete the recommended exercises. This exercise is designed to be completed with a learning partner and intended to elicit conflict in order to reflect on your personal reactions to conflict and apply conflict resolution strategies. After completing this module, print the handouts provided and complete the recommended exercises. This exercise was also provided in Module 2 of the OCAT Virtual Training Series, incorporating a trauma-informed approach to navigate sensitive topics. To complete this exercise, print the handout titled Executive Functions. If you completed the exercise in Module 2, revisit the handout with a focus on how challenges with executive functions may elicit or escalate conflict with customers based on what you learned in this module. This exercise is very similar to the one provided in Module 1 of the OCAT Virtual Training Series, Improving Customer Engagement Through Powerful Interviewing Techniques. For that module, the goal of the exercise was to practice actively listening and applying motivational interviewing techniques. For this module, the purpose of the activity is to strengthen your interviewing approach and address any defensiveness or conflict that may arise in the customer during the interview. In addition to the training available through the OCAT Learning Center, we recommend reading the following books. Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. The Discomfort Zone, How Leaders Turn Difficult Conversations into Breakthroughs. And Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. You can also find additional resources through the Conflict Resolution Network, which offers free training materials and self-study guides that you can use and share with customers. Their 12 skills approach is designed to run problems through a list of skills to move toward resolution or at least improved management of the issue. The company behind the Crucial Conversations book is called Vital Smarts. They have a lot of different training and resources available to help improve dialogue, enhance accountability, improve performance, and influence change. And the Mediation Training Institute, which provides resources for leadership on the hidden financial costs of a specific issue by evaluating 9 cost factors, offers an online instrument that looks at the conflict management strategies currently embedded in your organization. This website also has resources for managing conflict effectively, building one's capacity to bounce back from conflict, etc. Thank you for taking this training. We hope it has been valuable to you and strengthens your interactions with customers.